Good morning and welcome to this presentation by the Londonderry Utilities Water Subcommittee. Today we're going to be discussing PFAS water contamination. I'll be the moderator. My name is Jeffrey McGraw, and with me are Water Subcommittee members Ray Breslin and John Ferreira. Also members of the Water Subcommittee are Martha Smith and Ann Fain. They're unable to be here tonight, but they work very hard and they add a lot of value to the subcommittee. We're primarily focused on discussing issues of water supply and contamination in Londonderry, and we're going to focus today on the PFAS and PFOAs. I'm going to start talking with John, and then we're going to get to Mike Malaguti, who's our town manager, in just a little bit, and he'll tell us more about what the town of Londonderry is doing specifically and some other areas related to water supply in Londonderry. So John, can you tell us what are PFAS and how do these chemicals affect Londonderry residents?
So you'll hear the terms PFAS and PFOA, and they stand for, and excuse my pronunciation of this, polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, or paraffluoroalkyl, anyways, PFOA.
Yeah.
Just remember them
that
as
was perfect.
forever chemicals. So PFAS has been used to create numerous products since the 40s, like non-stick Teflon cookware, waterproofing of clothing, and foam to fight fires. Due to a spill in America in 2000 by the St. Gobain Performance Plastics Group, many people have been exposed to PFAS, the PFAS chemicals, which is a known toxic contaminant. It is unclear how long it takes for these chemicals to break down in the body and environment. That is why they're called forever chemicals. However, since finding out about PFAS, PFOA, many families and businesses have begun to use bottled water or carbon filtration systems for all their needs in our area.
Why is exposure a problem for these chemicals?
Well, the biggest problem is, of course, from research, recent health studies have shown that exposure to these PFAS and PFOS chemicals have resulted in a variety of cancers and health issues.
That's serious. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on in southern New Hampshire with the St. Gobain? We've been hearing about St. Gobain facility we've been hearing so much about.
Yes. So it all started with the company released contaminants of PFAS and chemicals in the environment and the drinking water supply. These chemicals continued to be released into the air today as daily deposits contaminated the soil and the waterways in southern New Hampshire. With rain and other precipitation, PFAS makes its way into the groundwater, and then after that, leaching onto other water supplies throughout the entire state. The St. Gobain water issue has also affected hundreds of private wells in addition to the public water systems. The spill and subsequent contamination of groundwater and private wells in the local area was first detected in 2014. It has taken state government and officials years to understand the impact of contamination of the surrounding areas. It was later determined that these chemicals have been actually infiltrating the southern New Hampshire environments since 1987 and elsewhere in the United States.
Wow, that sounds pretty scary. What's the state been doing since they've been learning about these problems at the state level?
So the state, as St. Gobain contaminated has affected hundreds of private wells and public water systems, certain residents were advised not to drink or cook with tap water, depending on the testing they did at each of the individual wells. The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Resources, better known as NHDES, responded by issuing an enforcement order to St. Gobain to investigate remediates of the contamination.
What have they done to remediation at this point?
So what they've done so far is, as first step, St. Gobain started to provide bottled water to residents in 2016. And some of those residents are still on bottled water.
Okay.
The New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services issued an enforcement consent decree in March 2018 to St. Gobain. You'll hear that term consent decree because it means a lot. It's a legal document. It contains areas and maps, information which we'll give everybody at the end of this broadcast where they can see the maps and everything that goes with it.
And we can put a video of that, a graphic of that.
Yes,
up,
a graph of that will
okay.
come up in there.
Okay, great, thank you.
So the consent decree actually is mitigation measures, a site investigation, a building of a water treatment system to clean up the Merrimack Valley District and private wells 4 and 5 within the descent decree boundary. So unfortunately, up to 1,500 homes in the area yet have their water testing done, and that number does vary and grow. At least 1,100 properties outside of the decree area have wells polluted by the St. Gobain and are not included in the agreement.
So who will receive the latest remediation assistance through St. Gobain?
So according to local news organizations, as of 2022, the government estimates that 1,000 properties in Bedford, Litchfield, Londonderry, and Merrimack may receive permanent drinking water as the agreement between the state and St. Gobain. And home and business owners also receive it.
Okay.
The New Hampshire Development, NHDES, and the State Attorney General's Office have been crucial in creating this access. Previously, the company provided bottled water, new water line connections, or a home point of entry, and you'll hear the term POET, point of entry filtration systems to provide clean water to properties in the immediate consent decree area. We'll also have more information on that, again, how you qualify and things like that at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, my wife and I purchased one of those POET systems, and we love it so far. So if that's what St. Gobain is doing, what's the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and the EPA doing?
So the state of New Hampshire current drinking water standard is 12 parts per trillion.
Per trillion?
Per trillion.
Wow.
In March 2023, the US EPA proposed drinking water standards for PFAS and PFOA at 0.4 ppt. Again, this has been an educational thing that's been going on since way before the spill. It's been a discovery thing. We're discovering higher concentrations. It's affecting more areas, and medical research has shown it's affecting more and more people.
Sort of like lead in the 70s.
It's a
Kind of.
continuous thing, yeah, growing education. So once the EPA regulation is published, states are going to be required to meet or surpass the standard. Many states have independently begun initiating bans of PFAS chemicals.
Is there a map showing where what's included in the consent decree so I'll know if I'm in there or not?
Yes. So if you want to see the actual decree map, as well as the testing results across the state, you can look at the state-provided PFAS map and comparing it to the St. Gobain consent decree. While St. Gobain is the most expensive contamination in the region, it was only one source of PFAS in New Hampshire environments. And again, we're going to have to put that up at the end of the broadcast to show you where the website is and get that information.
So we'll have sources at the end.
Yes, we
That's
will.
great. So if I had a private well now, and I'm a Londonderry resident of Londonderry, sorry. So if I am a resident of Londonderry and I have a private well now, what can I do?
So, for those not in the consent decree area, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services has also offered a rebate program. If you have a private drinking water well, it has been strongly suggested that you contact the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to have your drinking water tested.
Okay.
If the results come back to equal or higher than 12 parts per trillion, then you can then choose to have a whole house carbon filter or a kitchen-based system installed in your home. You may be reimbursed by the state up to $5,000. That's up to the state. Some companies will install the system for you and seek funds later from the state.
So you mentioned the POET system and the whole house carbon filter system. Those are the same thing, correct? Or
No.
similar? Okay.
Well, yes, the POET system is.
Okay.
That's the whole house.
Yep.
And then you mentioned the under the sink one.
Right.
That is a separate one. It's much smaller. The POET system is a much larger one, usually put in part of the house, cellar or something like that. But yes.
So we can put up more information so people can follow links.
Absolutely.
Great.
And there are companies out there that have a lot of information. Again, it's buyer. It's up to you to negotiate with those people, figure out what they can offer you, and go from there. So.
Okay, great. What additional resources do residents have for information?
So again, we'll put this up at the end.
Okay.
A really great resource is Amy Russo, who we hope to have at a later time come to a town meeting.
Great.
She's going to be doing a Q&A for the town council, for Mike and people like that. She's the response administrator for the state. And you can reach her at amy.russo at des.newhampshire.gov. Her number is 603-271-8801. And again, we'll put that at the end.
Right.
Also, there's an EPA site, www.epa.gov/PFAS. There's a whole bunch of information there. And the other one is New Hampshire Department of Environmental Safety. That's also www.des.nh.gov/, that's it, /.
Great. And we can we can post these on the video, and
Yes, we can.
We'll put them in the description of the video as well, so people can click right through.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
great. Thank you very much, John. That was very helpful. So a lot of stuff going on at the state level and the national level, and people working on stuff. Mike, town manager, we have you on camera. We have you in the hot seat. What has the town involvement into this for the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jeff. And first of all, let me just thank you and the Utilities Committee, including Ray Breslin and John Ferreira, for having me.
Yeah.
I'm certainly excited to be here. Been talking a lot about PFAS since I took over as town manager just over 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it really has been an education for me, I think, as much as for the town, and on roughly that time frame. I'll be the first to tell you that our understanding, as I think you put it, John, has emerged over time. And as a community, perhaps we didn't jump on this as quickly as we necessarily could have. But one thing is certain, and that is that there is just increasing awareness around this issue. And that is because there's more science coming through that tells us.
So what greater science?
Yeah. What are the potential impacts on human health and across populations?
Sure.
What have we learned as time has passed about the prevalence of this chemical in our environment?
Well, it's everywhere, isn't it? Pretty much.
Yeah, and in addition to being the the forever chemical, you might call it the everywhere chemical as well.
Yeah.
Because not only, as John pointed out, is it in the was there that aerial deposition that we learned about from the St. Cobain plant, but it also was in all sorts of products that people dumped down their drains into their septic systems, and so it got out in the environment that way. And so we've learned more about that as a nation, as a community. And one of the things that I think we got right as a community is we stood up a task force, a PFAS task force, early on, and that was geared around figuring out what people know and don't know and how to fill in some of those gaps. That culminated with a report that the task force issued and a vendor fair where folks could come in and get information about who was offering these POET systems, who's offering testing. And so that, I think, helped to generate some awareness in the community and was really important for some of these more concrete efforts that we're working on now.
Is there, I don't know if it's appropriate for the town to get this information, but is there like a list of installers of POET systems in the town of Londonderry, or is there?
Yeah,
is that something that we have posted on the town?
I believe that information was generated as part of the PFAS
Great.
task force. We can certainly freshen that up if it needs to be, and make sure that is accessible to everyone. One of the other things I would mention is, as we go along here, the town is launching a PFAS awareness website. It's going to be on the Londonderry NH page. We'll have more information about that soon, but it's going to be a collection of the report from the task force that I mentioned, the consent decree itself, so that people can get eyes on that, down to information about vendors that might have some of that information accessible. We worked on the rebate program with the state. Yep. That was really a program that was designed for Londonderry, and it reflects the fact that this consent decree was settled on by the state under an earlier standard. So that was when the standard was 70 parts per trillion. There was a lot less testing at that time.
Hold on, you said 70 parts per trillion, and now it's 12?
That's right.
And they're going to 0.4.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. And I should point out that the 0.4 is contingent on, the 4 parts per trillion is contingent on a lot of rulemaking activity that needs to take place.
It's making sausage.
It is. But that's the rebate program reflects that basically the western third of town was incorporated into this consent decree area because that's where the heaviest contamination was under the prior standard with the prior state of the testing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that situation has evolved to the point where now a lot of Londonderry is affected. A lot of Londonderry is just as contaminated under the existing standard. And so the state has worked with us to make sure that those folks are helped out as well.
Do we have maps showing where contamination is in wells and that show this well and this well and this well where the contamination is?
Yeah, that's one of the things that DES has really gotten right, I think. You can go on and it's the sampling map. It's on the DES website. We'll provide information for that.
Great.
And you can see what your neighbor is testing. You can see what somebody across town is testing. It's really important information to have.
Maybe we can include that on the PFAS website, and
Absolutely.
we can maybe put it on this. Sounds like a lot of work for the water subcommittee.
Absolutely, exactly. You guys have been busy.
Dang.
A few other things I'd mention, as we've gone in terms of what the town has been up to. Sure. A smaller scale project, but it speaks to what you mentioned, which is that a lot of this contamination, or some of the contamination, comes from other sources. And there was a very localized spill that occurred by the Apple Tree Mall. That's the big Shaw's Plaza right in the center of town. A number of years ago, and those folks had some of the most contaminated wells that anybody has seen. Okay. Hundreds of parts per trillion. People have been unwittingly drinking that for years. And so the voters approved a water line extension that the town oversaw in cooperation with Pennachuck to run water out to 8 of those residences there. Okay. So that was an early effort that was taken that I think has succeeded.
Sounds like a good first step.
Good first step, and it gave us the opportunity to kind of test out a potentially larger project, which we'll talk about in a bit. Yep. Another thing that we've done that I think just kind of highlights the importance of this topic to town, but also the need to access the community's collective expertise and wisdom, and that is the Utilities Committee, the Utilities Committee. That was an outgrowth of an earlier effort that was, as I said, focused on PFAS kind of in a general educational sense. Utilities Committee works in other areas, but there's a strong focus on water, I think I would say, more than as much as anything else. Right. And so that work is underway. And then a lot of what we know conceptually about what a water system might look like in Londonderry. A lot of what we know about the infrastructure that would be required was developed by DES. They engaged a consultant to do a lot of that work, and that's been underway. I would say was underway for a couple of years, 2020, 2021, into 2022, but it was finalized. We were working with DES and the consultant all along to try to figure out what a system might look like. And that's that big $250 million system that everybody's heard about.
Yeah, that's a lot of work, yeah.
The kind of the Cadillac version. So at least we know what the whole thing might look like 20, 25, 30 years down the road.
Well, we have time to do it right.
That's
and
right.
Sounds like now is the time to get it done correctly.
I think that's right.
And we'll get to that next step in a bit.
That's right.
So that was really good. Thanks for all the background on what we've done over the last couple of years. Is there any other key achievements that you've had in the last 2 years that you want to hit on before we go to the next question?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and they're not my achievements. They really are the community's achievements. People talk a lot about, gosh, water is a real concern. We need to address this. A lot of talk, and you never quite know when it comes down to, hey, are you willing to pay money, potentially significant money, to address this problem? How folks are going to vote? And I'm proud to say that in 2022. The voters approved $100,000 to finance some of this study work that we've done. And that's really gone a long ways, and it's continuing to pay dividends, believe it or not, today, as we continue to rely on expertise from a consultant who we hired under that Warren article. We studied, and I think this is valuable information for the future, what a town-owned water infrastructure system might look like, what a town municipal water system would look like. We studied the rates over time. We studied the assets, and that work was funded in cooperation with DES and some town dollars, and it was finalized last year. Provides important information about what it would look like if the town were to go into the water business. Okay. And then finally, I would mention last year's Warren article, which was really testing support for an expanded water system in town. But not just, hey, do you like vanilla ice cream, but saying, hey, do you want this water infrastructure in town, and are you willing to pay for it? And that passed something like 3-1. It really was an overwhelming showing of community support. But as I said, not in the abstract, that this is something that we're willing to invest in the community. And I think that was really a collective effort of educating folks about what we were thinking of doing, getting a lot of input, but also making sure that people were comfortable with the idea that none of this is for free.
Yeah, it's important. Everybody, if you ask someone if they want this, most anybody will say yes, but when you say it's going to cost, if you want X and it's going to cost Y,
That's right.
That's where the rubber hits the road.
Exactly.
And at the end of the day, this is 2024. We want clean water. We don't want to be the next Flint, Michigan.
That's right. That's right. And I think people are starting to recognize that this is a really serious problem affecting a big swath of town.
Well, I think that's maybe not a great segue, but it's an opportunity to go to the next question. So what's the current status? John mentioned Saint-Gobain as one of the contributors to the contamination. I want to make sure I say that correctly.
Yep.
So what's the current status of the relationship with Saint-Gobain and Londonderry? I know there's been talks.
Yep.
Is there anything that you can share that might inform the conversation on the relationship with Saint-Gobain?
I'm happy to do that. And let me just kind of dispense with the elephant in the room, which is when you bring up Saint-Gobain, well, why isn't Saint-Gobain paying for the whole thing? And the answer is may not be satisfying, but it's relatively straightforward. They're not responsible for all of the contamination.
Sure.
Were we to go to court, we would have to prove that they're responsible for each and every molecule of contamination, and that's not something that DES, when it was crafting the consent decree, thought would be productive. As I said, it was under an earlier standard, it was with less testing, and the consent decree was finalized based on those realities, and just the reality that better to get started and to move forward instead of litigating this thing for 15 years.
Sure.
And so that was the determination that DES made. We are bound by the consent decree. And by that I mean that we can't take Saint-Gobain. Londonderry cannot take Saint-Gobain to court. Okay. And that's because under well-settled New Hampshire law, we don't have the ability to litigate on behalf of our citizens. That's called representative standing, and that's something only the state has. And we don't have a municipal water system. It would be different if we had a municipal water system that took water out of the ground in wells, and those wells, because of Saint-Gobain's actions, were contaminated, and we needed to go and spend $1 million, $2 million, $3 million to remediate those wells. That's not the case because we're not in that in that line of work. And so what we've been doing is working with Saint-Gobain, working with DES cooperatively on things like the rebate program, but also on things like the water line extension project that we're going to be talking about. We have been negotiating with Saint-Gobain in terms of what its intentions are.
Sure.
And this is a good place to pause and talk about what Saint-Gobain is obligated and isn't obligated to do.
Right.
Saint-Gobain is a party to the consent decree. The consent decree is a court order. It is legally enforceable. But what it provides and what the general law provides is that Saint-Gobain is responsible to bring clean water to every well with a PFAS exceedance within the consent decree area. It doesn't say you have to do that by way of a water line extension. It doesn't say that you have to do that by way of a POET. It's silent. It allows for some discretion on Saint-Gobain's part.
So they're requiring outcome, not method.
That's exactly right.
Great.
And as part of that back and forth that DES has had with Saint-Gobain, Saint-Gobain has proposed, hey, these are going to be what we're thinking for water line extensions. This is what we're thinking for POETs. And we need to go and study it further, do some more engineering study to determine the feasibility of those water line extensions.
Are they the only ones that could decide that, or is that a negotiation between the state and various towns? And I imagine it's a negotiation.
In terms of the consent decree, it's primarily a matter of the state and Saint-Gobain.
Okay.
What I would tell you is that I think that DES has been working to create an environment where it's easier for Saint-Gobain to choose water line extensions, and that's a big part of this project.
Yep.
But ultimately, when it comes down to it, what the state can mandate Saint-Gobain do is to bring clean drinking water to each of those wells with the PFAS exceedance.
So it's outcome, not...
That's right.
Got it, okay.
Now, we've piggybacked off of some of that work by trying to, as I said, create an environment where it's easier for Saint-Gobain to say, yeah, frankly, we prefer water line extensions because we don't have to maintain them in perpetuity. We don't have to maintain them until the levels come down because it's a clean connection to a public water system and it's never going to have PFAS in it.
Right.
And so that's part of the work that we're talking about here, is we're taking the work that Saint-Gobain is thinking about doing, is studying, and we're saying, let's be partners in this effort. Let us make it easier for you to say yes to all of those water line extensions, but also to other water line extensions along the way.
Sure. Did you have something,
So
John?
what I've seen you working on is with DES is preferably a water system, because the POET systems are expensive, they'll have to be maintained, there'll have to be another one built and another one in every house as when we find this. So what you're looking to do is now do the infrastructure to get the water into the town so we can have it available, keeps our property values up and all those things at one time.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about, John, and it's a good point about property values fire protection. That's something that's important to people and insurance rates. But yeah, we're talking about getting the supply into town. That's really what we're talking about here. It's a foundation. It's really the cornerstone of a future water system in Londonderry, should we decide to do that in the future.
So that's actually a great segue to the question of the warrant article number 3, which is coming up on the 12th. I should know that, but the 12th.
That's right.
So how does warrant article 3, I know we've read it and there's a lot of numbers going around and it talks about 25 million, 2.5-ish million, and 200,000, and there's interest rates. Can you walk us through, one, sort of how it's structured and why it's structured at 25 million, and how that fits into the longer term? I know it's going to be an iterative process, but the longer term clean water plans for the city of Londonderry.
That's a great question.
The town of Londonderry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess let me start with what I think is the most important thing first, and preface this by saying that I'm not here. I don't think the Utilities Committee is here to tell anybody how to vote or to twist anyone's arm. I think what we're here to do is to make sure people understand the article, as you pointed out.
I'm trying to understand from the guy who's
yeah. Because when
in
you
the hot seat.
when you go into vote and you see some of these articles, it's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And unfortunately, they have to be crafted in a particular way.
Right.
Let me put the bottom line up first. This is an opportunity to get a $25 million water infrastructure project. It's a water main that will benefit the residents of Londonderry for years to come for $2.95 million in Londonderry tax dollars. Now, you're going to walk in, and let me back up a minute. The $2.95 million is not money that we're raising all in year one. It's a loan through the PFAS remediation loan program. That's under Amy Russo's administration. And that loan program is designed for projects just like this. You have contamination. You're trying to rectify contamination and the effects on human health. So the state has stood up this program that has really favorable terms that will require us to pay 1% interest during construction and 3.5% over the life of the loan,
which is 20 years. Did I see that correct? Do I recall that correctly?
Yep. The discussion was 20 years, and you just can't find loan terms like that pretty much with anything right now.
Yeah.
So that's the project. That's our piece of it, but let me add some more information so
please.
people understand the full picture.
Educate me.
I talked about the work that St. Gobain's doing, which would be a part of this project, because in order for St. Gobain to run these water line extensions, they're either going to have to pay for the main or they're going to have to rely on work that we're doing. What's nice about this project is, in order to run water line extensions out to each of the residences that St. Gobain has proposed initially, right, the water line only has to be a certain size, call it 6-8 inches, because it's only going to so many homes within the consent decree area, which have a PFAS exceedance under the current standard. What we're trying to do is to say, let's upsize that line. Let's upsize that line to support the full build-out of Londonderry in the future, and also let's run it further down High Range Road. So that people can connect along the way, but also that we're not going to have to go back if we decide in 15 years that we want to build out this water system, dig up the road, dig up the 6-8-inch pipe, and start over.
So we're piggybacking on a project that has to be done piggybacking on a project that has to be done. Well, that needs to be done anyway.
That's right.
Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, which is that St. Gobain has not committed in writing. That is true. People ask that all the time, and I think we need to be honest with people that we don't have that in writing from them. What we're hoping is that a successful vote here will make it a little bit easier for them to say yes. Yeah. A lot of this is about timing, and someone has to go first.
Yeah, it's making sausage.
That's right.
Like you've said.
That's right.
So it's future planning. We know we're going to need it.
Yeah.
Let's not dig up the ground twice. Let's do it once.
Yeah, and I guess a couple other points about this is, let me finish the
No,
funding
please.
piece, and then just move on to kind of some of the other benefits. Unfortunately, under New Hampshire budgetary law, you have to what's called gross appropriate for the entire amount, and so that's why when you walk into the polling place, you're going to see a $25 million or $23 million number. That is not the number that we're asking voters for. That is not the number of Londonderry's contribution. That includes the work that Saint-Gobain is looking at, because that's part of the project. It includes other dollars that we're asking the state for in terms of grant funding. $7 or $8 million is what we're hoping for, and the signals are that if we put this skin in the game that we're talking about putting in, that that'll be viewed very well before the state. And then we've got this one-time infrastructure money called ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act dollars, was a grant essentially to the town of Londonderry. We received it following COVID, kind of on the tail end of COVID. Not tax dollars. It's not money that will raise the tax rate. It has never been raised from taxation. It's federal dollars that have come into town to support projects just like this. And so when all is said and done, what we're looking at in terms of a Londonderry contribution is roughly $5 million in Londonderry's contribution. $2 million of which are not tax dollars. We are not asking the voters for approval.
So, keep going. Sorry,
Yep.
keep going.
And $7-8 million in grant funding through the state, on top of the work that Saint-Gobain is looking at, likely to do within the consent decree area.
So when my wife asked me the question, what if the town is asking for X $2.5-ish million?
Yep.
How much is that going to? When my wife asked me how much is that going to impact us,
Yeah.
what is that for? Say for instance, you had a house worth $500,000.
Yeah, that's a great question.
About how much of that over a year would that be?
That's a great question. So it's $0.034 on the tax rate. And what that translates to a home of that value is roughly $15 a year.
Oh, per year.
We're raising $215,000 to support the first year's debt service. I'd expect a savings because we're going to be in construction for part of that year. But the nice thing about this loan is we only take it out for as much as we need, right?
Sure.
And if the project is a $22 million project instead of a $24 million project, we only take out so much.
Sure.
We're not raising it. We're not putting it in UFB. None of that. We're not raising it if we don't need it.
So it's almost like it's not a lump sum that we're due for the full $2 million. Okay,
That's right.
That's even
That's right.
more interesting.
And then the other, I just want to be really clear about this, which is, we're talking. Let's locate ourselves geographically here.
Sure.
I think that would help. And some of the maps that we're talking about putting up earlier and hopefully now on the playback will help with this. But the consent decree area, like I said, forms really the western third of town. And the boundary of that is nicely defined by High Range Road. High Range Road goes roughly from the northernmost part in town. It's Harvey Road up in that area, but from roughly the northernmost point in town, pretty much all the way to the southernmost point in town, and it kind of does it in a straight line. So to the left of that is consent decree area. We're not responsible for that. Saint-Gobain is responsible for that. But literally just across the street are some of the most heavily contaminated neighborhoods in town, but they're not inside the consent decree area. And so that becomes, in part, a Londonderry problem to solve. Sure. And that's what we're trying to do here.
So that actually feeds into, well, before I get to the next question about all of Londonderry Public Water, are there other things that we need to know about Warrant Article 3, aside from it's on the 12th, which is 2 weeks from now? Is it 2 weeks?
Yeah, roughly 2 weeks. I would just say that it is, people say, well, what's the plan? What
That's a great question.
What's the plan from here? And the plan is always to get the supply where it needs to go in order to then begin distributing out into the neighborhoods.
Yep.
We're talking about a 25-year plan here. But what I want to underscore is this project by itself will do a lot of good, even if people don't decide in the future to build out that water system.
Well, it's like if you're building a house. You have to build the driveway no matter what.
That's
you
right.
have to get
That's right.
the first part step
That's
done.
exactly right.
And even if we build the Cadillac project like
That's
you were
right.
talking about, or something a little more, a little less robust, we'll still need to have the water coming in. And this is part of that. Is that correct?
100%.
Okay.
And like I said, we're in a shifting regulatory environment here. I think this project, will hook up, a significant number of residences just along High Range Road,
Okay.
if people choose to hook up. But as time goes on here, if we really do regulate down to 4 parts per trillion, there's going to be a lot more residences in town with a PFAS exceedance under the then current standard, which is a lot lower than the standard now. And I think that something like this is only going to facilitate remediating those wells if and when that time comes.
So that's a great opportunity for me to ask the question. Going past those homes on the west side
Yep.
of High Range Road, what's the status of providing a public water supply for all of Londonderry? I know I think it's about 50% on well water. I don't have the data in front of me, but what's the status of giving people at least access
Yep.
to town
Yep.
water? I know. Well, I have you here. I'll
Yeah.
ask you the question.
I think the most important thing I can say is that we are not here to make anybody hook up to town water.
Of course.
You know, we don't have that legal right, and it's the United States of America. We don't want to do that. So people, you know, first of all, we trust the voters to say yes or no on the warrant article.
Yeah.
I think over time, voters have made wise decisions in that regard. But we trust people to decide whether they want to hook up or not, whether they want to do a POET or not.
Right.
What we're trying to do here is to, one, have that no regrets policy that I talked about, right? So even if we just as an initial step run this line all the way down High Range Road, let's make sure it's the right size,
Sure.
so that if we want to do even limited build-outs in the future, we're not digging up the road.
Yep.
So that's important. But also, I talked about we're trying to solve a problem outside the consent decree area here now. We're also trying to improve the situation within the consent decree area, and we're trying to do it with incentives, right? I talked about how we want to try to make more financial sense for St. Gobain to say yes to water line extensions as opposed to POETs. There are residences with PFAS exceedances inside the consent decree area that St. Gobain has proposed POETs for. If we run a water line a water main right by those residences, it becomes a little bit easier for St. Gobain to say, no, we're going to switch those over to water line extensions. So we're hoping to do good both inside the consent decree area and outside.
Under the heading of making it easier to make a decision.
That's right.
A permanent decision.
Exactly right.
I like that. I like that. So so if that's looking at public water for those areas, are there plans to extend
Yeah.
the public water, or I'm sorry, make sure I say this correctly, to make town public water available to the balance of the residents of Londonderry?
I think that's a great question, and there's no easy answer to that.
Okay.
What I would say is a couple of things. One is we need to decide as a community if we do that and where we do that. And I think that I've had conversations with members of the Utilities Committee. I think the Utilities Committee is getting ready to do some work in this area, and that is to decide what is our long-term plan. Where is the need the greatest?
Right.
I can tell you by looking at that PFAS sampling map what I think, but it doesn't matter what I think. It really should be a community decision, and I think that's where the Utilities Committee can start to do some of that good work that's already underway. And the second thing I will say is, as a policy, I think the DES supports, and the town certainly has been supportive of efforts to expand the supply of water wherever we can. We're doing that with these 6 or 8 community water systems. Those are homeowners associations, condo complexes that have a shared well, maybe, that has a PFAS exceedance. A lot of those are connecting to the Penachuk system with the assistance from the Drinking and Groundwater Trust Fund. And I think that that is bringing a lot more folks online. There have been supply agreements that have been negotiated between Penachuk and Manchester Waterworks to facilitate a lot of that work. Woodmont Commons, I think, as a general matter, supports, maybe even requires the expansion of clean water on a public water system within its geographic boundaries. So that's important. That's a pretty significant part of town. So I think that's sort of where we stand in terms of what are our efforts, what are our plans for expanding water. It should be a community decision.
Yeah, it
So
sounds
Mike-
like a lot of work.
So Mike,
yeah.
I can say that this is correct or not. We're looking not only long-term, but economies of scale,
That's right.
because a lot of people don't know the history of the town in the sense that there were a lot of community wells.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of one of those. And those wells never keep up with the development.
That's right.
And there's been a lot of takeovers, and Penachuk's been involved in that. And you're involved in that, like you said, the other homeowners association. So we're looking to make it financially feasible for those communities to hook into
Yeah.
it. Not only that, if the water line does go by the house, at least the homeowner has the choice.
That's right.
POET or a water line. And the way the committee's working, we're trying to do is make it the water line connection the most
That's
feasible.
right. And something you said just kind of resonated with me there, John, which is the wells never keep up. PFAS is what's referred to as an emerging contaminant. We didn't know what it was a number of years ago, although different people had different awareness around it. There's another PFAS coming. We're probably already drinking it, and there are no guarantees except that when you're, for the most part, with limited exceptions like you referenced before, Flint, Michigan.
Yeah.
If you're drinking municipal water, it should be clean. It's required to be clean,
Yeah.
and you can take at least more assurance than you are taking water out of the ground that it is clean.
And it's easier to install engineering controls at a single community water filtration
right.
system than at 37 wells across the community.
That's right.
Yeah, I understand that. So you talked about, I understand that the decision about bringing town water to the community, that's an ongoing process. I understand one of the challenges on that, or one of the concerns on that, is the volume of water in Londonderry, and part of that is, access to a proposed water line coming across the Merrimack River.
That's
And
right.
I'm not sure the status of that is, and since we have you here, I want to
Yeah.
ask the question. And then there's another large 30-inch pipeline coming down from Manchester. So those are not the same question, but they're definitely related. So can I get you to sort of talk about what other access to additional water coming into town are available as we move forward?
Yeah, so this has been a concern. It's a good question, Jeff, and it's been a concern, certainly conceptually, as we've talked about building out this water system. And let's take a step back and just point out that a lot of we have two water utilities, two large water utilities, major water utilities in town, and they're Pennachuck East Utility, which comes over, which is based in Nashua, but in Londonderry has a supply agreement with Manchester Waterworks, and then Manchester has its own franchise in the northern part of town.
Sure.
So we get Pennachuck gets a lot of its water from Manchester Waterworks. They've negotiated additional supply agreements to support some of the Woodmont Commons work, the community water systems that are coming online, and then some of this work. And so we're fairly confident that the supply is. We're confident that the supply is there to do all of that. But we're looking, down the road as well, and so have some folks in Concord.
Sure.
And that has resulted in that water crossing across the Merrimack to bring some of that water from the Pennachuck system across the river into Londonderry, whereas right now it's coming from Manchester by way of a supply agreement. That will address supply concerns in the long term, because supply is not going to go down. Demand for supply is not going to go down. But it'll also improve quality and redundancy.
Yep.
We want interconnected systems as an engineering matter. We want to make sure that if something goes down, we have another source. We want to
So
make sure that
we're looking at a multi-point solution for the long term.
that's right. And the same is true for that 30-inch line up in the northern part of town. That is something that Ray has raised quite a bit, raised awareness around.
Yep.
That is work that is commencing, hopefully, this construction season. That looks like it will be. And same theory, right? We want interconnected systems. We want redundancy, and that is to support the distribution, the supply and distribution of more water into Londonderry and other points south and east over time.
Sure. Well, it sounds like we've got a lot of work ahead of us. Got some contamination problems. We've got 2 different zones of contamination. We've got at least 2 different water suppliers, and a lot of people on wells. We've got 2 or 3 different places we're getting water coming in, and we've got a whole lot of work ahead of us.
That's right. I think you really put your finger on it. And some people would say that mishmash is a big problem. I think
it sounds fun.
It's a problem to be solved, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess what I would say is that's New Hampshire. New Hampshire is all about choice, and I think that that has contributed to some of this mishmash. Some people want to stay on their wells. Some people aren't interested in building out this water infrastructure. Some people have different solutions on different timelines, and so that's sort of, I think, part of who we are.
Yeah, I think if we're able to give people access to access to town water at the front yard.
That's right.
Whatever the proper verbiage is for that, and they still choose to be on a,
Yeah.
on a well.
That's where government's role should end.
Yeah,
I think. at
I
the
love
curb.
that. That's
Yeah.
why I moved to New Hampshire,
That's right.
because I love that. So, John, do you have anything else? Any
Yeah,
other
so
questions for
Vista
Ray
Ridge
or
is
Michael?
a good example, but
Yeah.
right now we're having a little problem with a delay in the rerouting of the pipe. Is there
Yeah.
any status on that to
Yeah,
accelerate that?
So that's not a town project, but I do know that that's it's something that we have awareness around, and that was solved by way of a negotiated easement that Manchester entered into with some property owners up there. So we don't have to worry about the route up there any longer. Now we just have to get it built.
Great.
So part of the good news is through the state, and I know support from the towns, like the work you've been doing, we've basically stopped the air pollution problem coming out of St. Cobain, and actually they're going to leave the state. So that's sort of the good news, which now doesn't pollute our waters
Right.
and stuff like that. But we still, of course, have rain and ground filtration, and that's why we're doing this whole system.
That's right, and I think it'll take some time to flush out, so to speak, the contamination that's in the groundwater. It'll continue to seep, or that's in the soil. Will continue to seep into the groundwater. The St. Cobain is still operating for a time. I can't recall exactly when they're leaving, but big problems and some potentially big solutions. But it's up to the community to decide if they want it.
Thank you.
That's great. Ray, do you have any questions?
I think you've covered everything very well.
That's
So, no, not at this time.
Well, I want to just say thanks for the awareness that you've brought to the issue, Ray. I mean, nobody's been a more tireless advocate for water awareness and action in Londonderry, and I really do think that we wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for your involvement.
Yeah, Ray's a bulldog.
Well, it's about all of us working together.
Yes.
Yep.
We will be having more presentations. The town will be also having some meetings, public meetings to discuss this. The committee is going to bring in some experts and have another video presentation. So stay tuned to that, and we'll keep things moving.
Yep, and if you have, you can find our websites on the town, you can get access to their websites for the Londonderry Utility Committee. My name is Jeff McGraw. If you have any recommendations for things that you want to hear about water, just send me an email on my town email, and I check it almost every day. So I look forward to feedback from the community.
Yeah.
And if anyone has any concerns or wants to get involved, just reach out to us. Michael, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me, everyone.
It's a pleasure.
And I look forward to working with the committee on these big challenges
Yeah.
that we face.
Yeah, this is great. Is that it?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.